Well, good evening, everybody. It is Thursday. I'm David Paul, KHOU 11 Chief Meteorologist. Here is your tropical update. The Northern Hemisphere, the Atlantic Basin continues to be busy with Henri and Grace. Henri looks likely to batter the Northeast United States as we head into the weekend, maybe as a 90-mile-an-hour hurricane. A close look at that. And Tropical Storm Grace weakened from a hurricane to tropical storm as it moved over the Yucatan. Now it's pushing back into the Gulf of Mexico. It is going to re-strengthen as a hurricane, make a second landfall in Mexico, but it may not cross over into the Pacific Ocean, at least not with the same name. I'll explain here as we move along. Two storms. There's Grace moving back into the Gulf of Mexico. We'll start with Henri, who has had an interesting day today, and you'll notice right off the bat this infrared satellite imagery. It's a very tight, clustered storm, but notice how all of the upper level cloud tops have been blown off to the south and southwest today. Max winds in Henri are at 65 miles an hour. It has been unable to become a hurricane today, and it has everything to do with that blow of wind across at the upper levels. This is wind shear. What I put on here are the wind flow, wind streams at 250 millibars. That's at about 30 to 35,000 feet. And as those winds have blown across the storm today, they've blown the cloud tops and basically tilted the storm over to the south and west. Now, why is that important? Well, a healthy hurricane wants to grow perfectly vertically stacked, straight up and down. That allows good inflow, good rotation, good outflow, and the storm can rapidly intensify. That's a healthy storm with no wind shear. When you introduce those winds up at the 30,000 foot level or so, it literally tilts the storm over. That wind shear disrupts the wind flow as the storm is trying to develop. And if wind shear is strong enough, it can literally rip a storm apart. In this case, the wind shear is going to let up, and as the storm moves north, it is expected to strengthen into a Category 1 hurricane, becoming a 90-mile-an-hour hurricane early in the wee hours on Sunday morning. And not too far after that, you'll begin to feel the impacts as we head into the day on Sunday across the Northeast. In particular, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts, and the Cape may take quite a blow as this hurricane and then strong tropical storm moves in. Now notice this, the center of the forecast cone keeps the storm just offshore. But remember, statistically, it is just as likely that the center of the storm will pass on the left side of the cone as it is that it'll pass on the right side of the cone. So Hartford, Connecticut, Boston, Massachusetts, you guys are in play for a possible direct hit. In addition to that, as the winds begin to increase, the waves are going to increase as well. And so here we are going into 11 a.m. This is Sunday morning, and that's when the worst of the wave action will hit folks on the immediate coast of Rhode Island and the coast of Massachusetts out to the Cape. On the south side, the south-facing shore, so Nantucket to Martha's Vineyard, maybe some pretty good waves here on the far eastern tip of Long Island. And then as the storm moves further north, that counterclockwise rotation will begin to push the waves up against the coast of Boston and Massachusetts. And so Boston, you may have wind and wave heights going up to 15 to 20 feet. That's that light green color pushing right into Boston. As the storm continues to lift on out, it is forecast that the waves will begin to settle down after that. But take a look at the two computer models that we lean on heavily, the American model, the GFS, and the European model in red. Both are fairly in good agreement that this is going to be a coast for Cape Cod. However, take a look as we move further out in time. This is going into Sunday at 11 p.m. So Sunday morning through Sunday night, both of these models now are bending the storm back inland and centering them right over Boston, Massachusetts, Sunday night. That means you guys in Boston and across all of the upper New England coastline, you could have more than 24 hours of heavy rain and strong wind. So power outages will be an issue going into the second half of the weekend, and heavy rain as well. Flash flooding will also be a major threat. How much rain could we get here? It's really too early to make that forecast because we don't know the exact track. But a good way to guess is to look at how fast the storm is moving. And at this point, the storm will be only moving at about 5 to 10 miles an hour. Take that, let's say 10-mile-an-hour forward speed, and divide it into 100. So how many times does 10 go into 100? Well, it goes 10 times. So a good rough estimate as how much rain you could get then is 10 inches. A storm moving 10 miles an hour could dump about 10 inches of rain. Were it to slow down to 5 miles an hour, well, how many times does 5 go into 100? 20 times. You get the idea? The slower the speed, the heavier the rainfall estimate. So a storm moving at 5 miles an hour has the potential to dump up to 20 inches of rain. And this system is going to slow down as it moves up toward Boston as we head into Sunday night. And then it very slowly begins to exit. This is Monday morning at 11 a.m. So this is 12 hours later. And according to the GFS and the Euro, the storm just hasn't moved much. In fact, it parks itself here. So you may be in for some very heavy rain on Sunday and Monday up here. And then the storm slowly exits, perhaps giving us a little bit of wind and wave activity to the coast of Maine and Bangor. And if you're thinking to yourself, I've seen this movie before. Well, you have, if you were up here in 1985. In fact, it was September of 1985 that another Henri, a tropical storm in this case, came up and dumped some wind and rain up here across portions of Rhode Island and Connecticut and Boston. And this was a much weaker system. This was September 85. In fact, the maximum rain totals across the area were only about 3 inches with 1985's Henri. It is quite likely that 2021's Henri may dump a whole lot more rain and be a stronger system. Now, back to Grace. Now, this is the Yucatan Peninsula. Here's Cancun, there's Cozumel. It was at 4:45 a.m. Thursday morning that the storm officially made landfall, the center crossing Tulum as a Cat 1 hurricane with winds of 80 miles an hour. That was the first landfall. It then weakened into a tropical storm, and it is still a 60-mile-an-hour tropical storm this evening. But look, it's now crossed back across the coastline, out over the open water of the southern Gulf of Mexico, the Bay of Campeche. And these waters are very warm. We're 84 to 86 degrees out here. And so the storm is going to re-strengthen and we think become at least a Cat 1 hurricane before its next landfall across the Mexican coastline. Interesting. Even these small hurricanes, and even one that's 600 plus miles away from Houston, will impact the Houston coastline. Here's how. It has to do with the wave action. Now, this is what it looks like in Galveston on this Thursday evening. It's a beautiful beach evening. You've got the jetties, and the waves are very small. They're only 1 to 2 feet maximum. Good for swimming out here this afternoon. And it will be okay as we go into Friday. But Saturday and Sunday, the wave action from this very small, compact hurricane in the southern Gulf will send waves that increase up along the Texas coast and increase the surf to maybe 2 to 3 to 4 feet. Now, it doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but the coastline here is very, very low, and you've got roads that run right along the coastline here, especially along the Bolivar Peninsula, Highway 87. At times of high tide, you will see some of the low spots on Highway 87 be inundated with the tides running 2, 3, 4 feet above normal. And if you're swimming this weekend down in Galveston, Bolivar Peninsula, rip currents will be a significant threat. The water comes up on the beach, it piles up, and then it can race out. And when it races out, if you're caught at it and you're an inexperienced swimmer, you can be taken on out to sea. So watch those kids and inexperienced swimmers like a hawk if you're heading down to enjoy the beaches of Galveston this coming weekend. It's this mountain of high pressure to the north that will push Grace into Mexico. But will it cross Mexico and get into the Pacific and continue to be Grace? Well, it's still a possibility. Models take the system into Mexico and then a remnant low exits into the Pacific and reforms into a new tropical system. But if you remember, we talked about this last night. To keep the same name that it had in the Atlantic Basin on the Pacific side, the storm must not degenerate. In other words, it still has to keep a tropical surface low. And that's looking unlikely. Here's why. As the storm hits the coast of Mexico, it's a Cat 1, it's looking good. However, interior Mexico is very mountainous, and it looks likely that the storm will be absorbed by the mountains of Mexico, absorbed. Well, it'll rain itself out, it'll be torn apart. Now, this is going to create a significant flash flooding threat in interior Mexico because as those mountain peaks stick up, they literally wring out all the moisture in a tropical system. But now it looks unlikely that the storm will stay together, so it will exit. There'll be a mid-level low that gets in the Pacific, but it will get a new Pacific name instead of having the name Grace. So it'll be a system with 2 names. And back to the dust, which is forecast through the weekend into Monday to be significant across the entire stretch of the Atlantic Basin. This should limit and snuff out new development. And looking at the long-range computer models, nothing is forecast to form out here over the next 4, 5, 6, 7 days. That's not set in stone, but the dust is a good indicator that, yeah, maybe that forecast is right. And after Grace and Henri go inland and go away, we may see a quiet spell in the Atlantic Basin. Got questions, comments? I would love to see them. Social media, David Paul KHOU, Twitter, Facebook, Insta. Another update tomorrow. We'll see you then.